Which exercise is best? HIIT, low intensity steady state cardio, or resistance training? So in the last lecture, we talked about a license to eat and how you may actually end up subconsciously eating more food when you're told how many calories you burn through exercise, and subsequently the difference in appetite people have from cardio, and that's the same in a lot of different training modalities. So today we're actually going to compare interval training with low intensity cardio with resistance training for which is best when it comes to weight loss. And as a personal trainer, as a coach, it pained me when I started to learn about this, but actually many exercise sessions burn far less calories than we actually expect. And when it comes to weight loss, it appears exercise alone is not enough. And actually this was taken from a review where they put lots of studies together. Physical expenditure alone, so just exercise, typically results in a change of less than 3% of initial body weight. So if someone weighs 100 kilograms, if they just started exercising alone, it'd be roughly 3 kilograms worth of loss, with absolute weight losses between half a kilogram to 3 kilograms in body weight. Now, how depressing is that? As a personal trainer, I'm telling you this because we know there are far more benefits to exercise than just fat loss. But if our goal is purely fat loss, weight loss, exercise alone will not cut it. So if any of you think right now that we can out-exercise a bad diet, unless we are a top-level athlete doing hours and hours and hours of training, it simply is not going to happen. So diet trumps exercise when it comes to fat loss. However, diet plus exercise beats diet alone. So we can lose a tiny bit of weight just exercising. We can lose a lot more weight just doing diet, but actually we lose the most weight when we have a calorie deficit through a diet and we use exercise. And as I said in the last lecture, when it comes to calories, we spend in pence and earn in pounds. So it's far harder to burn calories through exercise than it is to take calories in through food. However, exercise has its main benefit in helping keep weight off. Roughly 1,500 calories of exercise per week helped participants to gain less weight post-diet. So after we diet, most of us gain a little bit of weight back, and we talk about this again in future lectures, but those who exercise more keep less weight on, or put less weight on and keep more weight off, I should say. And same again in the second study, participants who made a high level of activity lost more weight than a standard group and kept it off as well. So whereas weight loss alone isn't great with just exercise, it is fantastic for helping you keep that weight off. And again, it's from the same paper, so these are all just different studies, but although physical activity may have modest effects on initial weight loss, physical activity may be a critically important strategy for the maintenance of weight loss. So if you want to keep that weight off and you want to keep the figure or the shape that you've worked hard to do, keep up that exercise program. As exercise helps you to keep your calories higher as you diet as well. As we said before, we want to keep our calories as high as we can while still staying in a calorie deficit. So keeping up that diet, keeping up the exercise nice and high is going to allow us to diet on more calories. And it may help in a reduction in activity. So as we said before, if you can think all the way back to our NEAT lecture, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, those of us that do regular exercise tend to move more throughout the day as well, which again pumps up our calorie output so we can consume more calories than those who don't. So actually, how does it help fat loss? Well, as we said, it increases energy expenditure, and we have two different types. We have during the session expenditure, which was one of the strongest predictors in changes in fat mass, because when we think of weight loss, and we talk about this in our scale lecture, weight loss isn't always fat. It can be muscle, it can be fluid, it can be carbohydrate in our bodies. It's not always fat. So when we say weight loss, normally we're talking about we want fat loss. After exercise, we can burn calories. Some of you may have heard this as the afterburn, but it's excess post-oxygen consumption. Although this has been largely overstated. So some of you may have heard of workouts like Insanity, workouts that say 6-minute intervals or 6-minute ab blasts or something like that, where the idea being that you work, or Tabata, where you work super hard for like 20 seconds, you rest for 10 seconds, and you do that 6 or 7 times. It only takes you minutes, and you'll be burning calories for 72 hours afterwards. Whilst that may be the case, it's very, very much understated, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And exercise may also slightly increase your resting metabolic rate, or your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, because you've got to repair the muscles. And this is where resistance training can be really useful. Basically, when we resistance train, we slightly damage the muscles, so they have to repair, and this repair process takes a lot of energy, and we're going to see that in a second. And we may get a slight repartitioning effect. So this is where we might send calories toward rebuilding muscle, to refilling our carbohydrate stores within our muscles, and not towards fat cells. So as we said, it's not beneficial on its own, particularly for weight loss. It can be great as part of a weight loss plan because it increases our energy expenditure during the session, after the session, as well as help potentially moving calories towards muscle building and not fat. And I just wanted to take a second to talk about the benefits of exercise beyond the scale, because yes, lots of us start exercising to shift weight, but actually people with higher levels of activity have improved life expectancies, lower risk of chronic diseases, reduction in visceral fats, which is the kind of bad fat around the organs. That's probably the most dangerous, and that's independent of diet. So people who just started exercising had lower levels of visceral fat with no change in their diet. We move better, we have less pain, stronger bones and joints, more confidence, better mood, better cognition, stress management. There are 101 reasons, and I'm probably speaking to the converted here if you've been exercising for any length of time, why exercise is superb beyond simply weight loss. So with that slight tangent out of the way, let's talk about cardiovascular training, or CV. So when it comes to weight loss, if we want to maximize the amount of weight we're going to lose, we need to maximize our exercise volume over our intensity. So again, this comes back to the point where I was saying that if you're doing intervals, but you're going to do 4 minutes of intervals, you're going to burn very, very few calories. However, if you do a longer session, then it's going to burn more calories. So the volume of the session is directly related to the calories. So if you can do more reps and sets, if you can do a longer run, you're going to burn more calories. So this is my kind of little joke. We often see people, if you're not in a commercial gym, you might not see it, but those people who are incline walking and they're holding onto the treadmill really hard, basically it almost looks like they're going to pull their arms off as they incline walk. They're going to be burning very few calories because they're making it so easy for themselves. And again, they'll look down at the screen, it tells them they've burnt 500 calories, it's going to be far closer to 100. EPOC, this thing that we said again, the afterburn, is much higher with greater intensity and volume. So basically, the harder and longer you can work within a session, the more calories you're going to burn. However, it is much, much lower than we once thought. So actually, during a training session, cardiovascular session, roughly 6 to 15% of the calories that you use come post-session. So if someone's ever said to you, yeah, do HIIT training and burn calories for 72 hours afterwards, you're only going to be burning probably an extra 6 to 15% of the calories. Now let's think about this. If you only burn 50 calories because your session's 7 minutes long, then you're only going to burn an extra 6, 7 to 10 calories after that session, which is absolutely nothing. So again, it all comes down to maximizing the amount of calories that we burn per session. So just to put that into context about the afterburn, or EPOC, if I did a session that was 250 calories, I would burn an extra 15 to 38 in my afterburn for the next 72 hours or so, which is roughly kind of a quarter of an apple. And just a side note with that, for these people that do really like intervals, and I like intervals, it's just got to be for the right people at the right time, exercise intensity needed to get the afterburn effect may not be suitable for non-athletic populations. So if you're particularly overweight, if you've got painful joints, etc., a lot of the time some of these very high intensity protocols may not be appropriate for you at this time. So cardiovascular training, if we want to maximize our fat loss, we need to maximize the volume and intensity. So let's compare, or take a little look into steady state cardio, where we do, long runs or long rows or long bike rides, versus high intensity intervals. And in this study by McGarvey, they took 2 different protocols. So they did a HIIT study. They did a HIIT protocol, which was 7 lots of 2-minute sprints at 70% of VO2 max, which is pretty hard work, and with a 3-minute recovery. And they compared that to a continuous cycle for 30 minutes at 65%. So they've done the same amount of work, but one of them's done intervals with recovery, one of them just did a steady pace throughout. And as we can see here, the difference between the two was 10 calories. So during that 30-minute session, the continuous exercise burnt 171 calories, the interval session burnt 181. So realistically, it's a 10 calorie difference. It's absolutely nothing. And in that instance, if I just nip back, again, the difference that 10 calories makes is less than negligible. So at this instance, it'd be what do you have time for, and actually what do you enjoy. If you enjoy doing HIIT training and you can do a decent amount of it and you're in the condition to do so, go for it. But if you want to get outside, do a longer run, enjoy yourself, that's also acceptable. Question I often get asked is, do we need to do fasted cardio? And despite the claims by some that fasted cardio is excellent, it's actually no better than doing it fed, than doing it with a bit of food in your body. Now, fasted cardio does actually burn more fat during a training session. Your body will naturally use more fat stores. However, over the remaining 23 hours of the day, your body then naturally burns less fat and burns more carbohydrate, and it basically finds an equilibrium. And they found there's no difference between the amount of fat you burn over 24 hours between doing fasted cardio and doing non-fasted cardio. And actually, for some people, fed training, so doing it with a small breakfast in your stomach, may allow you to train harder because you've got some fuel to burn, so you can burn more calories in that session. However, again, this is where it's so individual, because for people like myself, fasted cardio actually suppresses appetite. So for me, if I can go and do a short bit of cardio in the mornings, if I'm dieting, I'm not actually too concerned about the amount of calories I burn, because it's the impact it has on my appetite. It really lowers my appetite, so I'm not hungry till later in the day. Whereas other individuals, it may really increase it. So as I'm going through this now, and we're going to go through resistance training as well, you're probably starting to see a picture that it's about burning the most amount of calories we can do within the sessions. And then actually beyond that point, it becomes down to personal preference. As you said, perform the type you like, most likely to do and most likely to stick to. Remember that bottom pyramid tier of the pyramid, it's adherence. What are you going to do? And normally you're going to do what you enjoy doing. So let's take a quick look into resistance training. I'm a big advocate of resistance training. I know a lot of the lift the bar trainers are advocates of resistance training. The average weight session burns between 60 to 400 calories, and 400 calories is very, very high volume. Again, exercise just doesn't actually burn as many calories as we think, with roughly 50 to 75% of the energy expenditure coming from the session itself. So let's take that 400 calorie example. Roughly 200 to 300 calories of energy will be burnt during that session, with the remainder coming in that afterburn. And once again, there's a direct relationship between the volume, which we can think of as the number of sets, and the calories burned. So we want to do more sets, more exercises. And this is where we teach everyone at Lift the Bar, and I'm sure your trainer does it with you, to keep the sessions dense. You'll be doing work back to back. So you might do a pulling exercise with a lower body exercise with core or something of that nature. We're going to try, within the hour we have you for, we're going to try and do plenty with you. Now that doesn't mean that we rush you through every exercise, because we want to keep form brilliant. We want to keep you lifting a decent amount of weights, because remember, if we don't rest long enough, our weights start to come down, and that's no point in just doing kind of circuit classes, but we make sure we get lots of high quality work with you. As I said there, if you rest too little, your work will be reduced, which actually means lower calories burned. So there is trying to find a sweet spot between working our hardest but resting enough so we can work at a good intensity. So a little quote I'll use: rest as little as you have to, but as much as you need to. And so when we think of the epoch, when it comes to, remember that's the kind of calories we burn after the session. When it comes to weight training, again, it's not as great as we expect, but it's still quite good. For the kind of 24 to 72 hours after an exercise session, on average, we tend to increase the amount of calories that we burn by 100 to 200 as we look to repair that damaged muscle that we talked about before. However, as we get more and more trained, as you get further through your lifting career, this may get less and less as you just get better at repairing. And again, exercise might be brilliant in reducing some of the reductions we see when it comes to NEAT. So remember, when people tend to diet, they tend to want to move around less, talk less, just basically any way they can save energy. Actually, exercise is a bit protective in that fact, and so it can keep you not only burning calories within the session, but help you to be more active outside of the session, which is a win-win, which is kind of backed up there. However, as we've gone through before, some individuals do compensate with low energy expenditure. This is why, again, I say it all the time, we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to exercise, because we might have someone who does morning cardio whose appetite is completely reduced and they don't get hungry at all, and the weight just drops off them. Whereas we may have some other unlucky individuals who tend to do an exercise session and they just compensate. They sit around for the rest of the day and they overeat, and it's just the way it is. But again, if we use this course, this is why this course was designed, to educate you on these matters and educate you that these things happen, and then we can look out for it. You can start monitoring your activity after exercise and seeing, do I actually start to reduce my steps? So, resistance training versus cardiovascular. Energy expenditure of the sessions will vary, obviously, depending on the fitness of the individual, how fast they recover, their strength, the exercises that are chosen, and how many sets we do within the session, and the gender. So there's absolutely loads of variance. But in a study here that compared 60 minutes of running at 70%, so that's a decent old run, 70% of your maximum for 60 minutes, and 60 minutes of weights. And this is probably similar to a session you'll see with your personal trainer, kind of 3 to 4 sets of an exercise with 10 different exercises. And this was the resistance training, and this was the running. So we can see in the resistance training, we're just focusing on this left-hand side. In the 10 hours after the session, their metabolic rate was far higher. It had gone from 1,900 to 2,100, and it remained elevated for the next 48 hours. And it was a very similar finding with the running session. It was elevated to 2,150 in the 10 hours after, took a slight dip 24 hours after, but was still elevated up to 48 hours after the session. So when it comes to our EPOC, our afterburn, and the total number of calories that we burn, actually cardiovascular work and resistance training both have a very similar effect in terms of calories. However, my caveat to that is when it comes to resistance training, not only are we burning calories, we are improving ranges of motion, we are increasing strength, we are increasing our lean muscle. And muscle plays a great role in obviously shaping the body as well as burning slightly more calories when we're at rest. And this is a slight caveat for those people, actually, if you've been in sessions where your trainer has like a different finisher for you each session. This is why it can be very beneficial, because when we perform the same type of cardiovascular work, one of the adaptations is becoming very efficient at that exercise. So let me give you an example. If you started to be able to run at 16 kilometers per hour, which is super fast, basically, if you kept running at that speed, not only would you be getting fitter, you'd actually start to get so efficient at it that you burn less calories. Your body is able to do the same amount of work for less calories, so then obviously your energy expenditure goes down. So this is why it's quite good sometimes to do different cardiovascular work, different finishers, because we're always inefficient at it, so we always burn more calories. And this is where resistance training, it kind of has a bit of a trump card up its sleeve, because it may provide a novel way of preventing this. Because hopefully when you're working with your coach, every 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks, you change that exercise. What happens when we change an exercise? Our body's not used to it, we get sore, we have to adapt all over again, so we can't get too efficient. And as I said, resistance training not only burns calories like a lot of cardiovascular work does, but it also has far-reaching benefits such as building muscles, etc. And for most of us, yes, we want to be probably slimmer, but it's actually also having a decent shape as well, whether that be bigger arms for the men, bigger glutes, or bigger, smaller waist for the women, whatever it may be. So this is quite a long section, but here are our take homes. When it comes to body composition, and by that I mean weight loss, fat loss, do the exercise you enjoy and will stick to up to a certain extent. If you're short on time and you're feeling quite fresh and you've got the ability to do so, you can perform some HIIT. If you want to get outside and do a long run or a swim, hey, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Choose exercises that maximize your volume, whether that be the amount of minutes that you can run for, the amount of sets you do during the session, without lowering the overall work. So what I mean by that is, if you just try and do too many exercises with too little rest, your form's going to start to break down because you're too tired. So work as hard as you can with perfect form. And a mixture of resistance training and cardiovascular work, whether that be HIIT or steady state, is a great idea. Not only for burning calories, but it's going to give us the best of both worlds when it comes to shaping, building muscle, strength, as well as having a great set of heart and lungs overall health. Resistance training, yeah, my slight kind of bias, it builds muscle, and it expends calories, whereas whereas cardiovascular work tends to only burn calories. And remember, exercise alone for weight loss is not enough, but it's better than just trying to do it on its own. But the gold standard really is exercise plus diet, and then exercise comes into its own when it comes to keeping the weight off. So, is there really a best exercise when it comes to fat loss? No, it's the exercise that allows you to burn the most calories. However, once it goes beyond pure weight loss, we want to bring in other modalities to help us stay strong, keep up our strength, build muscle. And as I've just alluded to there, the benefits of exercise go so far beyond fat loss. And I'm sure many of you that are listening to this already know that.